Hello, welcome to The Way Through. I am your host, Bonnie Worth, and so thrilled that you are joining me today for this conversation. This is a really big one today, and it's been one that I've been really looking forward to, and probably because it is one of the areas in terms of my own healing journey that I really needed to concentrate on and dive deeper in order to really find myself and reclaim a sense of autonomy and well-being over my life. Now, the way through, this is where we are taking, a scope of insight through the lens of mediumship, through metaphysics, and of course, the co-creation of our reality. And so looking at the basis of this and understanding who are we being, how are we showing up in our life, and where is our line of responsibility in our contribution, not just our contribution to the people immediately around us, but I'm saying our energetic contribution to the world, our contribution in terms of society, in terms of globally, what is our contribution, and in looking taking a look at what it is we need to process, heal, shift, and awaken to in order to realize how to be of even greater contribution of that light, of the empowered state of being. So we're taking a look here today in terms of what it means in terms of being an empath, having the empathy, as a part of what is our a part of our humanity. We have empathy, or we should have empathy, or if we don't, we need to cultivate it in some way. But empathy being a fundamental pillar, so to speak, of what it takes in terms of nurturing our humanity, in terms of fostering a compassionate society. And it's by understanding that we share feelings, that we have a state of understanding or compassion for others, can be the very thing that can break down those barriers that divide us, that sense, creating that sense of belonging, that sense of connection. Empathy really is like an emotional bridge. It's the very thing that really expresses kindness and respect, and it's about seeing the equality of everyone around us. And of course, that kindness and respect and that support is essential, especially during our times of need. And not only does it support our relationships, but as a collective, it's the very thing that can inspire us towards, as I said, equality, the social justice, ultimately creating that more inclusivity, that state of oneness, that compassionate world for all. And so it's a big conversation, as we talk here on Empower every single week. This is about moving humanity forward after all of the challenges and difficulties that we've had. How do we do that? And this is where, here, as you tune in every single week, and I'm so grateful that you do, where we can have some of these conversations that allow us to unravel the very things that have created not only limitation in how we experience our life, but more importantly, how it is that we can shift and show up in a way that really creates that inclusivity, that unity that we are all seeking, or that we all crave on some level. Now, this is a really fundamental scope of what it means to be an empath, the state of empathy that exists, within us. And so it's a powerful human trait, and it's the very thing that allows us to perceive and resonate with the experience of others, how people feel, the emotions that they may be going through. And if you're someone like me who is sensitive to the feelings of others, sensitive to the energies around them, sensitive to the spirit world, I want to say this creates a real deep bond, in terms of not only a deep bond in terms of our interpersonal relationships, but a deep bond of understanding and of space that allows us to be witnessed and seen and held and heard and comforted, within other people, within presence, or within other people's presence, in your time of need. So it really does, bring about the chance for really profound connections. The thing about it is that it can create some complications, because as spiritual empaths, we can have the risk of developing codependent relationships. Now, codependent relationships are, are something that, you don't have to be an empath in order to develop it. It's just that it brings in another complex or complicated layer to our healing journeys as we move forward. So we can look at codependency as a part of, what is what is from this compassionate state, this, our ability to share feelings with others, to be the compassionate listeners, to understand the unspoken emotions or intuitively understand the experiences of others. However, that can lead to a state of exhaustion. That can lead to a state of neglecting our own needs, and also these dysfunctional patterns where one person emotional well-being is in the hands of someone else. And so that really leads to unhealthy dependencies and imbalances, in not only within the relationships itself, but even within the energetic body, that can create further detriment or challenge for us in being able to function at a healthy, vital state. Now, codependency, we can also take a look at it in terms of being intertwined or entangled with our inherited conditioning. And that inherited conditioning, one can be, if we grow up in an environment where there is emotional dependency, where caretaking behaviors are modeled or reinforced or celebrated. Now, again, often this happens within families where there's a history of what may be dysfunction, addiction, trauma. Those kinds of settings are where we are conditioned to prioritize the needs of others above our own, simply as a survival mechanism. And that's certainly, for me growing up in my childhood, and the things that, I've had to work and process, overcome, heal, and shift and transform. We can add whatever, a million words onto that. But it really is, it was how I managed or tried to create a sense of safety or security. So, we look at, overcompensating, right? We begin to internalize the beliefs that our self-worth is tied to how well we can take care of others in their time of need, how well we do at supporting others, even when the dynamics in can lead to further perpetuating of a cycle of continued emotional neglect or continued dependency. So this can be, incredibly challenging when you are someone who not only, it grows up under under this inherited conditioning, but it also becomes even more complex or complicated in being able to come, especially, as you sit and you're someone who is an empath. And as an empath, I mean, those individuals who are sensitive energetically to the emotions of other people, sensitive to the spirit world, where you are picking up on the information that is being transmitted, or that it exists within an unseen factor of the world around you. And so when you're sensitive to those, it creates more complexity to the ability to really claim what would be autonomy within our life. There's also, we can look at, as I said, so we can look at codependency being a part of something that we've witnessed, that we've taken on or inherited. It can be something where, because we are so sensitive to other people, that it creates this, this need or this yearning to help and fix and to feel needed in the world. But there's also, we can look at it in terms of the inherited conditioning that comes from the emotional or generational woundings that take place as well, where we look at, in history through the familial connections, whether that be within, a part of what is the paternal or maternal aspects of our genetics. Even when we look at what's passed down, the experiences of trauma, the experiences of emotional neglect, the unhealthy relational patterns can move through the bloodline. This can really create these unconscious behaviors and solidify the beliefs and paradigms within us that perpetuate the cycles of codependency. So when we look at understanding that as one is being an empath, is one of the most, I'm going to say, is beautiful. It's wonderful. It's such a fabulous gift because it allows us to to understand and share the feelings of others. We are compassionate listeners. We're skilled at recognizing what's being unspoken. We can intuitively understand what's going on, but it leads to further complication, as I said, because it creates this interplay that makes it really difficult and complex to be able to move forward and create a healthy expression to know where we end and where other people start even. Now when we look at it creates now another layer of complication. Now if you are someone who is both an empath and have experienced some form of wounding or trauma in your life, that interplay becomes even heightened in terms of the complexity and not only of the psychological environments but the tendencies that create the codependent nature in helping us to be able to function, to feel safe. And so it becomes codependency becomes an adaptive response that really where we become over reliant on other people's approval, in being able to meet the needs of other people. And very often, which means that we're not meeting our needs, where our emotional needs are even sometimes our physical needs, because we're prioritizing the feelings and well-being of other people to gain validation or to have a sense of belonging. Now there's a difference in terms of being the empath in prioritizing, in understanding and being there for someone, based on their experiences of being able to show up, to help, to love, to nurture, to care, and do what empaths do best in terms of being a presence for healing for other people. But there also is this intricate balance that needs to be played or attended to, because it can also lead to very unhealthy behaviors. Now initially, this is all about connection. This is all about helping and serving and being there for others. But when we do it based on the conditioning, based on the patterns that exist, it leads us to this lack of autonomy for our own lives. And then we become neglectful in terms of our own needs, our own wants, our own desires in life. Now, codependency is related directly to self-worth. And when there is a lack of self-worth, there is an increase of what are the feelings of inadequacies and the struggle in needing to seek the validation, to have us feel like we have a sense of value in the relationships with others. And so here again, it's tied to our ability to care and support not only for others but for ourselves. It's the very thing when we have a lack of self-worth, this is where we become neglectful, like our needs don't matter, we're not as important as other people, that we deprioritize how we feel, we suppress how we feel, we have all of those belief systems that are active inside of us that ultimately lead us to continue to prioritize other people, to that our self-worth is contingent upon our role as caretakers, our role as healers. And so it really leads to some unhealthy dynamics within our relationships. When we look at it in terms of being an individual, like myself, who experienced, a lot of trauma, there was what I want to say, there's a sense of hypervigilance that begins to take place. I remember, and I still can be very acutely aware of my environment. And I'm always checking in to the emotional states of others, where things are at. I'm always trying to get a read on the energy of the environment that I'm in. Now, I don't do it in terms of a hypervigilant state anymore. I do it from an empowered state. But when I look back, this was a big part of what was not only the conditioning of things, but was my reaction to the intensity of the emotional landscape of the individuals that were around me, because I was sensing, feeling, and interpreting all of it in some way, and needing to make it better, needing to heal it, needing to fix it for others. So when we look at where we are constantly in a hyper state of doing this, this is which means we are constantly monitoring, we're constantly anticipating, we're trying to mitigate any potential conflict or distress. And I remember very significantly doing this in terms of, when my dad would be, going through one of his alcoholic tyrants. That was a part of it. Where I was just like, how can I settle this? What do I need to do? How do I fix this? Is there something I can say? How do I redirect this? How do I, it was constant. And when I'm saying constant, not just from a place of, having awareness as an adult, but constant from even in a state of, being, 8 and 10 years old, or maybe even younger, when that really began to play out. And so part of it for me, I recognized as part of my path to healing was I had a very codependent relationship with my dad. That this was something that not only did I go to seek out to make it better, to try to mitigate any further conflict or any further upset within the home. And I would, always, I would say, almost like become overly attached or overly concerned about, getting, not only getting things to settle down, but also knowing that that I that my behaviors or what I was doing was going to meet his emotional needs. And so a lot of my childhood was growing up under that hypervigilant state of, and again, this unhealthy dynamic in my relationship, especially with my dad, which of course played out in different ways, why this is such an important conversation, because it's one where I've been there, done that. And it's also something that, I have to be very attentive and aware of, even as an adult, even in terms of being a wife and a mother and a grandmother. And so, we look at all of the influences and all of the dynamics that really get established. And I think, I've had it questioned to me is, why do we need to take a look at our childhood? We're adults now. What happened in our childhood is, so far removed from, the ages that we're at. And to understand that our childhood creates the framework. Our childhood experiences, what we take on, what we absorb, what we are witnessing around us, all form our internal landscape of what we realize that we might be worthy or deserving of. And so much of those experiences, our lack of, even self-worth or our self-esteem, it's locked into those patterns of the past. It's locked into the wounding or into the traumatic experiences. And that needs to be, not only identified and realized, but it also needs to be released. And it needs to, we need to basically reclaim, a sense, all of our missing pieces, so to speak. So it's important that we take a look at it. And again, this is not, every conversation, and, in the work I do, this is not about blaming my parents whatsoever. I mean, this is about, I have deep compassion for both, of them. And just knowing what they've been through and what their stories are, etc. All I can do is speak to you here in terms of what my story is and how the challenges, not only that I had, but of course, in understanding of why it's imperative that we look to heal and move through and shift and move through them, because of, being able to reclaim a sense of health and vitality. And when I talk about health, I mean mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, so that we can be completely, again, showing up in the best possible light for humanity, in the best possible way for our families, changing, shifting the cycles, doing our work, taking responsibility for what is ours and the whole equation in terms of what manifests and creates within our lives. So it's a very important part of a part of it. So, I'm going to go back here. I know I'm like, I have so much to talk about. We'll just come back to the conversation at hand. So, here again, when we look at, this sense of response, this pattern of prioritizing the feelings, it's a coping mechanism. So that hypervigilance, that response that I even had, with my dad, the nature of the codependent relationship was a coping mechanism that I instinctively unconsciously leaned on in order to feel safe in a very insecure or unstable environment. And so when, there's also these experiences are a part of what also instills that deeper fear of abandonment. And again, if you are just tuning in for the first time with my show, welcome. For those of you who are, staying as a part of, consistency within these series, thank you for being here, of course. But if you are new, I encourage you to go back even to last week's show and where I talked about what does abandonment mean for us, because this is really where, again, as an empath, if you're someone who's experienced, any kind of challenges or wounding within your life, this is not only we can become overly attached to the people who even hurt us. We can become overly attached to in relationships simply because we have this fear of being abandoned. And so we have this need to, or we're compelled to care and for others, sometimes even in excess, that we believe that our own emotional stability is contingent on other people, on their approval, on their happiness. That's where, again, as I talked about this unhealthy relationship with my dad, because I feared that he wouldn't love me. I always needed to know, even in the scope of it, are we okay? Are we okay? And then I would, do things in order to get his approval and to see that he was happy with my behaviors, etc. And so again, it really negated the impact of what those experiences were for me, what I witnessed, what I went through, etc., because it overrode it. Now, again, here too, when we look at, this in the wake of all of it, we that remember I said we look at codependency becomes a coping mechanism. It's something we do in order to feel safe. And so that can translate into those caretaking roles in all of our relationships and needing to manage everybody or control the environment or control the situation or even control others. And, we do this because we believe that we can fix them in some way, that if we can go above and beyond that, it's going to, prevent any future distress, any future chaos. And so, in the wake of it, we desire control. And so because of wanting control of the situation, I mean, we know that can further contribute to the complexity or the unhealthy state of relationships, because again, it's where we're trying to manage other people instead of managing ourselves, managing how we feel, being attending to our inner world, our inner landscape. We're more concerned about other people's feelings, how other people are behaving, and then taking it personally that it's like our fault that they feel that way, or it's our fault that they're behaving the way that they're behaving. So it really creates I mean, for when we look at the complexity of what this creates for us as though as someone who's sensitive, and it really becomes, a deeper dive into our own, not only our own psyche, but a deeper dive into our own worthiness. When we look at it here, worthiness, let's talk about that, because, we're already sensitive to how other people perceive us. And our self worth is very often tied to the ability to care and support other people. And so that, we believe that, our value comes from being able to help others for from our utility, so to speak, how we can serve and how we can help and how we can be there and to be the one who shows up at the time of needs. And I'm not saying we don't do that. I'm just saying we need to look at ensuring that our value comes from our inherent worth. And when we have an inherent worth, and even if we're sensitive, we can show up for people. We can still uphold those roles without compromising and outside of what is the unhealthy cycle or codependent cycle. Again, where we look at what causes us to suppress our own personal needs, that again makes the belief that other people matter more than us, where we neglect ourselves, and neglect our rest, and we neglect our time for fun, we neglect all the sometimes even being able to eat and take care of what are our own basic needs, because we're so focused on the needs of others before our own. And so when we look at We need to look at healing. What are those patterns? What are those belief systems? What is that conditioning that is created all of these experiences that we have that are keeping us unconsciously seeking out similar dynamics from relationship to relationship, whether those be intimate relationships, whether those be relationships with partners, whether they be with friends, whether they be with, colleagues or at work. There is a cyclical pattern that really continues and from the underbelly of the subconscious that reinforces all of those feelings of unworthiness and that reliance that we have on others for emotional fulfillment, which again just continues to perpetuate, the cycle. That need to feel needed. I mean, we can look at that feeling, it provides a sense of purpose. It truly does. And it's great. And I love it's so fulfilling to be able to help people. But when we are helping others from a deprived emotional state where we are masking over our unresolved feelings of inadequacy, it really creates the unhealthy justification for that codependent cycle. So we need to really look at not only moving beyond what is the emotional sacrifice in our caretaking behaviors, but we need to really begin to create, where are the imbalances and how can we foster and create a healthier dynamic in our relationships. And again, still show up as the healers, as the helpers, as the spiritual empaths, and do the work that we feel so called to do. And when I say work, doesn't necessarily mean it's your career and your full-time job. Our work just is in expression, in presence, in being who we are in the world, and to know that within there is purpose. There is purpose for all of us, and purpose in our presence, and purpose in our contribution. And so, whereas when we look at having the experiences, what happened in our life, the traumas, the patterns, the suppression of our needs, all of these fears of abandonance and abandonment, and the fear of losing the people that we love in some way. They're going to reject us or resent us if we don't show up, for them. That all of that becomes this aspect of sacrifice, and we sacrifice. We cater to other people's feelings. We cater to other people's demands, ignoring, as I said, our own needs, our own well-being, our own desires. And so, and it's all again so that we can ensure that the people around us feel supported, that the people around us feel cared for. And it's an inclination that does stem from a deep desire to help people, to be of service, but it also, as I said, engages, it causes the neglect of our own well-being. So how do we fix that? Well, it comes down to self care. We need to focus on, yes, let's be attentive for other people. Let's show up for them. But our self care practices become such an important part of it that we need to bring ourselves into somewhat of a priority in our own lives. If we don't bring ourselves or make ourselves a priority, nobody else does. We're so conditioned to prioritize everyone else that they're even we've taught them that's how they understand the relationship is. So they're never going to recognize that we're needing them to make us a priority, because we have set the stage, or we've created the dynamic within the relationship that we are the ones who are going to show up and be attentive to their needs, and we're going to prioritize them. And so if we are not feeling like a priority in our life, I used to always say, I always felt like I was on the back burner of my own life. Everyone else was on the front of the stove, and I was at the back on the very small one on very low heat. But we need to look at bringing ourselves into the equation of our own lives, where we can feel resentful because our partners, our spouses, our friends maybe don't prioritize us the way that we prioritize them. And instead of becoming resentful, because that's so low in vibration of existence, that instead of becoming resentful, we can begin to prioritize our needs, prioritize the small things, whether prioritizing 15 minutes of alone time, or being able to, go and sit down and have a meal and to say no, I just need, I'm going to just put myself first here, and I'm going to sit and enjoy and nurture my body and nurture, prioritizing our, engaging in self-care is such an important piece of this, because it brings us into priority, and we're the only ones who can do that. We are responsible for changing the patterns, the behaviors that have led to us over giving or overcompensating, or and really have created the imbalance, because our codependent relationships, that distribution of the emotional needs of who's more, I would say it's almost like who's more worthier than the other. It's very disproportionate, and so we have conditioned, as I said, very much in our relationships, where we extensively take the lead. We become very depleted, emotionally depleted, energetically depleted, and so we can feel completely overwhelmed by the needs and emotions of other people. We can become so entrenched in other people's lives that their distress becomes our distress. And so how do we manage that? Well, maintaining healthy boundaries. And I want to invite, I'm going to be talking about boundaries on next week's show, because it's been something I've mentioned several times on the show as we've been moving forward, and it's a really important conversation. So, if you're able to tune in and with me again next week, where we can really dive into the need for boundaries, of how they can be the most blessed thing we can do for ourselves and for our relationships. So we look at, how do we break the cycles of the codependency? How do we begin to overcome some of those things? And again, that self-awareness, self-care, self-awareness about our own personal emotions. Really checking in. How do I feel? What's going on inside of me? Where am I at? What do I need in this moment? All of those things becoming more attuned to our feelings is what's going to create a more balance in relationship, but also more balance in what is our emotional responses as well. And so, we can look at benefiting, so much in terms of cultivating our self-awareness, paying attention not only to, the external environment, but also paying attention to those triggers. And again, I, keep talking, but all of these shows are the very things that build in terms of helping to really clear uh, all the imbalances, to clear our field, our energetic field, to clear our emotional body, to increase a frequency and vibration, so that we can manifest things in our lives in accordance to what we've been praying for, as opposed to why do these things keep happening? I'm doing all the work, nothing is working out for me. Why is it that I'm not able to receive the answer to my prayer? Or why is it that I feel like everybody else in the world seems to have it all figured out and I don't? These become all important factors in terms of our ability to be able to to move forward, to have that sense of vitality, to really become not only co-creative, but receiving of the things that we're looking to bring into form as well. So we need to clean out, we need to up level or upgrade our vibration. We need to clean up and upgrade our emotional body. We have to, release everything that is creating the barriers, the blocks that is feel weighted and slowing us down, in order for us, not only to reduce the emotional overwhelm, but in terms of being able to replenish and our own energy, to have promote our own mental health, all of those things. So we have to look at how becoming our own advocates for that, simply because we have created, based on not only conditioning that we've inherited, conditionings from things that we've witnessed, but the very fact of how we've conditioned our own relationships, and being able to begin to alter what are those codependent tendencies, so that we can have more autonomy in our own life. Fear, there's a lot of fear. I mentioned this earlier, the fear of abandonment, the underlining fear of rejection is so big in terms of these relationships. And, for someone who is sensitive to the feelings of others, sensitive to energy, sensitive to the spirit world, the very often that fear can create a lot of anxiousness, a lot of anxiety, that fear of I don't want to upset the person. We leads us to being more compliant and enabling, even behaviors that continue to perpetuate things. And so, when we look at a common thread for so many empaths, it leads us to tolerating things in our relationships instead of being lonely, of making excuses for the volatility or of within a connection, or within our relationships, putting up with things that we wouldn't want our best friends to put up with, but somehow we tolerate it. And so it's that fear, that the fear of loss, the fear, but the anxiety that comes from that, again, is a part of what contributes to that hypervigilant state, right? So, when we look at the understanding this fear of loss, the fear of the anxiety of what this creates, the fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment, we need to look at self-acceptance, that with other people, and it's also making peace with the fact that not everyone in the world is going to like us. That was really hard for me, that I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I can't imagine, but it's just how it goes. But there was always that a fear of being rejected, the fear of the experiences that I had throughout school, throughout other relationships. So it was always that hypervigilance, that reading the room. What do they need? How can I make this better? How can I fix it? So in order to bring in what is the medicine for this, we have to look really in terms of our own self acceptance. So anywhere that we fear being rejected, we have to take a look at, where have I been rejecting myself? What is it that I haven't fully acknowledged, appreciated, or accepted? As I spoke last week on the show, where is it that I'm abandoning myself? We have to really begin to take responsibility for where we are at the present moment. We can't fix what's happened in the past, but we can absolutely, through our own willingness to change and understand the power that we have in the moment, to begin to take responsibility for what happens going forward. What are we creating in that moment? Because what we're creating in any given moment is based on our paradigms and our conditioning, the things, how we're feeling. All of that is a part of those silent prayers that are going out to the universe. So when we look at, we can't change what's happened in the past. We can understand it. We can heal from it. We can find new perspective of it. We can reconcile so much of what happened in helping us to reclaim our sense of self, but also understand the wisdom from those experiences. And once we've got the wisdom, and once the lessons have been learned, we never need to repeat it. So it's so great that we can have and understand our power to initiate immense change in our life by becoming more aware of the ways that maybe we've been letting ourselves down, the way that we have been deprioritizing our own self, where again, we've become codependent in our relationships. So we want to learn how to become independent within our relationship. Independent says, I'm no longer, it's no longer required that for others' validation. I approve of myself. I love myself, whether other people love or approve of me. This really becomes the key or core factor of being able to really move beyond what has been that rescue complex, that urge to help and to heal, that have, where we've enabled maybe the destructive behaviors, the unhealthy habits, how we've rationalized or made excuses for others, all of it, which is so counterproductive. And so we look at, how do we create so that we don't, we want to break this cycle so that we're not getting into where we are in a state of continual sacrifice of ourself, continual sacrifice that leads to that emotional exhaustion, that leads to the resentment, that leads to feeling unappreciated and taken for granted, and results really in that increased frustration and continued what would be suffering in our own lives. So we need to look at, how do we break that cycle? And so we do that through self-awareness. We do that by establishing healthy boundaries. We do this by looking at, how can we create a healthy relationship with ourselves so that we can move beyond what has been maybe those those unhealthy coping mechanisms and learn and and develop healthier ways of moving forward and forward, becoming recognizing, a deep sense of our own self-worth, and how our self-worth is only in it's not independent of others, it's dependent on ourself, how we feel worthy, how we view ourselves as worthy, how we feel in terms of our worthiness is everything that gets cultivated from the inside out. And so this is ultimately where we look at, not only attuning to the needs of others, but more importantly, whereas we as empaths, in order to reduce it, we attune to what are our needs. How is it that I can better take care of myself in this moment? What am I feeling in this moment? What do I require? And recognizing that it's okay to prioritize our own well being. We can prioritize it by, without feeling guilty, and being able to speak to what we need and require. It's such an important element of this. And so, again, this is where, again, I'm inviting you to tune back in, to next week's show, where I'm really going to dive in terms of, those boundaries, just knowing it's okay to say no. It's okay to prioritize our own well-being. In fact, the more often that we do that, the more it means that we can show up and be of service, or be of help, or support of other people. So we have to look at breaking the cycle. We have to start choosing ourselves. We have to start anointing ourselves as worthy, because we have dynamics that we've inherited. We have dynamics in relationships that we have to look at taking responsibility for as well. It's not always just about the other person. It's not. There's always, it always takes two to dance. There's always at least two people in a relationship. And so, we have a relationship with ourselves, but I'm talking the external relationships. So we've created certain conditions that the people around us have become accustomed to, based on the belief systems, the paradigms, based on what are the feelings of being able to seek what is the feeling of safety and stability in our relationships. And so, of course, it's natural for that to be the state of where things are. However, then with awareness, we can begin to alter and shift the dynamics of those relationships as well. Now, is that easy? Well, not always. And is it hard? Of course it is, because we can fall so quickly back into old patterns and into old habits. But every time we fall in a pothole, we get up. We pull ourselves up, we dust ourselves off, and we continue to move forward. Every time we do that, we're going to see that we're going to become very prone to no longer falling in those potholes, where we begin creating in those moments based on the choices that we're making and acting upon our ability to consciously choose in the moment of the of what we're worthy of, to choose in the moment how we're going to respond, to choose in the moment to prioritize or speak or communicate to what it is that we require or need. And we can transform our relationships. Not every relationship is done and over simply because things became challenging. This can be where we can actually transform our relationships. We do that by fostering our own well-being, by breaking free from the cycle. It means we need to create more balance, more balance inside of ourselves, more balance from holistically, of the mind, of the body, of the spirit, of the soul, of the heart, and being able to do that in a way so that we not only have more fulfilling connections with others, but enriching human connection, enriching what is our contribution to the world, to society, to the dynamic of our humanity and moving forward. So I know I've covered a lot on today's show. As always, I really appreciate you being here. And of course, your questions, your comments are so valued and such an important part of the conversations as they move forward. So please be sure to, reach out. We love hearing from you. Let me know if there's anything that resonated with you on today's show. If that you feel this episode was very helpful for you, or of someone who may benefit, please share it with them. I'm so grateful for any opportunity for my message to reach and to help others. It's why I continue to show up each and every week, and why I'm so glad that you do as well. So, for today, sweet friends, that is everything and that is all. So, I appreciate you being through. And remember, irregardless of whatever is happening in your life, there is always a way through when you come back to who you are. Bye for now.